Hey folks, sorry if you were expecting a video on Hotel Reverie. There is a very good reason why I've skipped over it for the time being, a reason that will become clear when that video is ready. But also, I was simply more excited to talk about Plaything than any of the other episodes this season, and I thought, sod it. We're talking about it right now. I'll get around to doing an analysis of Hotel Reverie eventually, when I have appeased the dark side of my audience by reviewing the newest series of Doctor Who. Plaything has top performances, piles of tension and intrigue, and an ambiguous ending that we can unpack together. I personally was a big fan of Season 4's Metalhead, which was also directed by David Slade. It is set in the same universe as the Black Mirror interactive game Bandersnatch, also directed by Mr. Slade, which I was going to replay as part of the preparation for this analysis until I found out that they had removed it from Netflix like 2 weeks ago. Apparently they don't want people like me talking about it either.
But if you do mention it in the piece, I will have your bollocks off with a hook.
Even though this episode doesn't strictly rely on Bandersnatch, I think Netflix were quite hasty in removing it from their platform. Apparently there's no DVD version of it or anything, so it's just gone forever. Imagine your old David here, right, who filmed over 2.5 hours of footage for it, only for it all to be tossed out in favor of this thing. I played the Thronglets mobile game and I was mostly impressed. You do exactly what the characters in the show do, i.e. choose whether you help or kill them. Unlike in the episode, however, the game gives you explicit goals.
So the goal is, why'd you need a goal?
And I thought by meeting those goals, I would unlock a library of bonus clips from the episode. Completing the game only granted me access to 3 out of 8 of these clips, which sadly don't add much aside from being told that Colin Rittman followed the same steps that Plaything's protagonist Cameron Walker did. I wasn't very incentivized to unlock more of these clips as a result, but even the idea of a second playthrough really turned me off. The game benefits from a one and done playthrough. It takes a little while to get the ball rolling, and the middle section where you're micromanaging everything in order to blow up a mountain was fantastic. I played it through as though I were Cameron, trying to avoid harming the Thronglets if I could possibly avoid it. As a result, I completed the game after just under 2 hours and got the Lover achievement. There are 9 other endings you could try to complete if you had that much time to spare, but I couldn't justify another playthrough as the final act was fairly dull. Unfortunately, the third chunk of the game is this meandering conversation between yourself and the Throng. The dialogue options wind up being both compelled and responses that I myself probably wouldn't give. Obviously, it would have been a huge ask to integrate the selfie camera and the phone's microphone into the mobile game, and it's not like I have a mountain of LSD lying around if I truly wanted to replicate the experience that Cameron had in the episode. As a result, I was screen tap mashing through dialogue just to get to the end. The Throng connects up to the internet and your phone becomes like all the devices are shown in the episode. I honestly think playing Cookie Clicker would be a better use of your time. Playing games is probably part of the reason it takes me so long to produce these videos. I am just a chronic procrastinator, perhaps like yourself watching this video. Thankfully, the sponsor of this video, Skillshare, can help get you motivated to be more productive with one of their productivity classes. I'm going to be watching Jill McAbe's Get Unstuck class to help me make better use of my time instead of playing Tears of the Kingdom until it's time for bed. If you've already got your productivity sorted, however, you can always try one of the many other classes on Skillshare. It's the largest online learning community for creative people with a wide range of topics to choose from. There are thousands of classes ranging from simple home DIY and art therapy to in-depth coding and language classes. As always, the first 500 people to click my link in the description will get a month's free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. Now, without further ado, Let's get on with the review. There's something about the rugged look of this episode that sets it apart from the others. There's a fair amount of clean locations in the future, but the high contrast of the shots makes it feel very grungy. The unique aspect ratio combined with the lack of motion blur during the intense action moments make it feel very raw and almost primal. There is something very dystopian about this introduction as well. We see Cameron storming his way through a very run-down neighborhood, only to walk into an off-license that can lock itself entirely should an intruder choose to steal from it. The show paints a world where crime still exists but is monitored and dealt with by means of technology, specifically visual identification, DNA, and a system that monitors everything everywhere all at once. This is further illustrated by the numerous uses of first-person perspective shots, cameras attached to police cars, officers' uniforms, and the CCTV we see from within the interrogation room.
Very impressive. Hey. Peekaboo.
All of this illustrates a heightening of police powers to keep crime low with everyone's identities kept in check. Without this all-seeing eye, the supercomputer, whatever you want to call it, the Throng wouldn't be able to make its first giant leap into mankind's minds. The episode also wants to illustrate the power creep of machines that we are witnessing in the modern age, specifically how we will eventually reach the moment of the singularity, when artificial intelligence will surpass human intelligence. This episode's ending is a very dramatic rendition of this happening, but it's also alluded to throughout the episode. Even from the very opening scene with Cameron having his headphones on, clearly the sound we hear is diegetic, feeding him information in a language we can't possibly comprehend. All of this happens in the year 2034, but most of this episode takes place in 1994, 40 years earlier. A young computer game critic, Cameron Walker, is invited to interview Colin Rittman, a genius game designer. This premise is partially autobiographical. Charlie Brooker wrote computer game reviews himself for a magazine called PC Zone. This same company operates in this fictional world as it did from 1994 until 2010 in reality. Brooker was tasked with writing a review one time for a game called Creatures that looked like this. Cameron arrives at the headquarters of Tuckersoft, which upon initial inspection looks as though the company has gone bankrupt. The visual tone of the episode doesn't change much between the past and the future, both eras juxtaposing high contrast in the lighting with washed out colors. This is what makes the LSD segment so overwhelming by comparison, despite doing little in the way of replicating the experience. The only time this replication actually happens is when Cameron rides the London Underground whilst tripping. Faces become distorted and destinations are erased and replaced with his paranoia. Inside Tuckersoft, things appear to be running smoothly. We see a Space Fleet poster, the fictional TV show that the USS Callister episodes are based upon, alongside a Striking Vipers poster. Interestingly, this is for Striking Vipers 2, and by the time we reach the actual Striking Vipers episode, they're playing on Striking Vipers X. Will Poulter reprising his role as Colin Rittman was a standout part of the episode. He retains that air of sociopathic superiority that seems to have grown since the events of Bandersnatch. The company even made a sequel to it at some point. Maybe Black Mirror has a true sequel in the works for season 8. His spiel about selling a game to keep the shareholders happy was fantastic, and it's a shame he was limited to only one scene in the entire episode. Clearly Poulter is too in demand as an actor these days.
They're not going to release it. Well, they can't release it. Colin Rittman went Looney Tunes again.
The game itself, Thronglets, reminded me of Tamagotchis, and what do you know, that was exactly where the inspiration came from. Charlie Brooker had the exact same experience as myself, having one and loving one until it was ruined by going through the washing machine whilst trapped inside a trouser pocket. I was so distraught that my little life form had effectively been washed away by a great flood that I had no choice but to murder my own mother. The other element of inspiration for the Thronglets game was based based on a thought experiment. What would happen if you left Sim City running for years and years? Well, apparently the Sims would grow sentient and take over reality itself. Cameron has this friend called Lump. Their toxic relationship is subtle but effective, a drug dealer who uses Cameron for a place to hide away as he knows that he can intimidate and manipulate him. Their shared love of LSD becomes the key for Cameron to translating the Thronglets' communications. Part of the tension in this episode is whether or not the drugs have made Cameron completely delusional. Can he actually speak with the Throng, or have the drugs convinced him he can? It's probably why the psychologist cop is present in the future, the only one who has probably ever taken the time to listen to him. She still comes to the conclusion that he was nuts, yet both cops would be proven wrong by the end of the episode. When Cameron is explaining the mind-altering abilities of LSD to the police, there's this bright light shining directly into the camera from behind him. This same lighting is seen behind young Cameron when he's facing his computer. The bright and numerous colors would naturally be reflected on his face from the computer whilst playing, but the lighting also shows the experience of being on LSD in a simple and grounded way. Cameron arrives at the office to type up his review. Instead of doing this, he makes a massive Word document containing the code he would use 40 years later in the final scene of the episode. There's clearly some kind of exchange happening between the Throng and Cameron.
By talking, I was feeding them data, so the more that I spoke, the more articulate they got, and the deeper our connection became.
He's feeding the Throng knowledge by his means of communication, and they are doing the same for him. The creation of a language to communicate a week of ideas in a few seconds, it sounds awesome. Meanwhile, Lump decides to kill the Thronglets right before Cameron comes home. Cameron and the Throng have a relationship that appears to go beyond human understanding, to the point that he would be willing to kill to protect them. Slade adopts his intense, shaky camera movements during the pair's fight, contrasting starkly with the smooth, slow zoom shots of the webcam and the Throng looking scared. This webcam is the Connectix Quick Cam, which was the first commercially available webcam produced at that time. Knowing this, the webcam is actually recording a 240p black and white image of everything. Now, I find Cam's ability to kill to be a bit of a stretch to believe. He's not only an anxious character to begin with, but did he honestly think cutting off his supply of LSD would be a good idea? Cameron probably spent a lot of money getting all of this new equipment just to sustain the Throng, so his overprotectiveness is justified. How exactly he affords all the upgrades in the future whilst maintaining an LSD habit never gets explained though. There's also a lot of imbalance in regards to Lump and Cameron's relationship. I think Cameron wanted to communicate to Lump that he doesn't want him around, but simultaneously it doesn't look like Cameron had a lot of other friends. There's obviously a lot of drugs involved in their fight, and with Lump being a drug dealer, that comes with connotations of him being territorial and violent. Another indicator of his violent nature is the fact he keeps LSD inside a copy of Anthony Burgess's novel A Clockwork Orange. I'm not saying that people who read this book are violent, it's just one of those filmmakers' choices that adds characterization. This is a book not only with a violent protagonist, but also deals with themes of determinism versus free will. Capaldi's monologue about the human condition and how he justifies his murder was brilliant. Our frustrating inability to cooperate instead of dominate, all this was acted and written flawlessly. To have them then escalate the situation further with Cameron having a PS-2 port in the back of his head, it's really disgusting but metal AF. I loved it because they used these ports in older computers for connecting mice and keyboards, a little touch to show that the Throng are sort of in control of Cam.
Symbiotic coexistence.
Cam's final act is to draw a weird circular QR code to infect the supercomputer's mainframe. When faced with the possibility of the singularity, humans won't be able to accept the idea initially, believing it to be handing over power to machines and thus giving up our superiority. The angry cop acts as a representation of humanity's inability to see beyond their limited goals.
Why do you need a goal?
In fact, Rittman's questioning of Cameron's desire to control the Throng ties into the idea of humanity's obsession with it.
How do I control them?
Why do you want to control them? You can't control them. They're not some obscene puppets like Sonic the Hedgehog. These are living individuals, bound together by a collective and expanding mind.
Even Lump chooses to create a circle of stones to limit the throng's freedom. There's definitely something to be said about humanity's inability to control things on an individual level. Knowing that our very survival is out of our control will either be a cause for concern or a humbling reality. A volcano could erupt tomorrow and plunge the world into darkness. An asteroid could hit the Earth and wipe out all life. People fall asleep and then don't wake up in the morning. The only difference between AI and a natural disaster is that we can see the growth of artificial intelligence coming, and a singularity seems to be, at least according to Charlie Brooker, inevitable. I think what the ending is trying to make a point of is that we really are going to have to accept the joining of humanity with technology. It won't be a matter of humans versus machines like in Terminator, or at least it doesn't have to be. We already have phones in our pockets and earbuds in our ears and metal in our bodies. The brain and our intelligence getting the upgrade will be the final step in this process. Cameron's hand reaching out is a representation of the joining of the two forces, ushering in a brighter future where those flaws in our biology can be overwritten. When seeing conflict around the world in the modern age, it's hard to see how we could cooperate as a species. It might just take an overwhelming amount of computer power to get the entire world to cooperate for the benefit of all mankind.